Hey crafty people, I'm Sarah, also known as Craft Nerd because I'm a nerd who loves to craft. Over the years I've dabbled in most types of crafting, although for the past decade or so I've been doing primarily card making and mixed media art. I've recently embarked on a junk journaling journey that I hope you'll join me on. Today we're going to make 2 platform pop-up cards using lawn fawn dies and stamps, and in one we're going to have a cute birthday scene involving gnomes, and in the other a cute birthday scene involving woodland critters. Let's get crafting! So I need to make a couple of birthday cards for my cousin's twins who just turned 2. Don't worry, this video is going to be uploaded well after the birthday party. And I decided I wanted to use the Lawn Fawn platform pop-up die set and the various add-ons. I'll link those dies below. I will also link the Lawn Fawn video demonstrating how to assemble the pop-up platform. I will go through and show you as I'm doing it, but they do a really great job of explaining how to use it. Now, since I'm making 2 cards, I've already die cut out 4 of the platform base pieces and 6 of the tees. So for each individual one you're going to make, you're going to need up to 3 tees. You don't have to put in all 3 of the tees when you assemble the platform, but that's the max number you're going to use. And then 2 of the platform bases. And I don't know if you can see in the video, there are score lines the die puts in when you die cut. So we're going to fold along all of our score lines. And I'm using just green cardstock from my stash. I like using, you know, at least a sturdy-ish cardstock because this thing's going to stand up like a little pop-up box. So you want a firmer cardstock so that it can hold its shape, not like a very thin copy paper weight paper. You want something that's got a little firmness to it. So I'm gonna make sure I've got everything scored on both pieces. Now I am going to use 3 tees for this one, and they also have a score line. I don't know if you can see that. So I'm just going to fold on 2 of them. You don't need to do it on the 3rd, and I'll explain in a little while that is. And we're going to assemble one at a time. So this is the outside. We're going to flip it over on the inside. I'm using score tape, and it's a 1/4 inch score tape, and I'm just going to add a little score tape to the bottom flap on the tee. Sorry about that noise. You could use glue, but you're not going to want to add the glue until everything's in position. So it's a little bit easier to use the score tape because you can then position everything first. So there's a little slot in the die. The tee goes through the slot. We also are going to need to put glue on here, but that I'm going to use art glitter glue for because I tend to hoard my score tape. You could also use score tape, which is how they do it in the Lawn Fawn video. So you're going to make sure, we're going to fold here. So you're going to make sure that the tee is flush with the platform right here. And then you're going to peel off the score tape on the bottom part of the tee. To make sure it's straight and flush, and then stick that down. Now the next step is we're going to glue this tab down, and so I'm going to add my glue this time, and we're going to fold at this score line up, so it's going to go like that. So let's flatten that out again, add some glue, and again you could use score tape for this if you prefer, or tape runner, or whatever you want to use. And so now we have half of our platform pop-up, right? So when it's all assembled, it'll look like that. so we'll set that aside. And we're gonna do the same thing with the second one. Add some, and I'll walk you through it one more time. We're gonna add some score tape to the bottom of our tea. So we're just gonna assemble this the same way we did the other half. Slip the tea through the little slot. Make sure it's flush with this piece here. Pull off our backing on the adhesive and stick it down. Burnish it with my scoring tool just to be sure. Then we are going to, again, bring this piece up and glue it here. And I'm gonna use art glitter glue for that. And there you go, we have the second half of our platform. So these two pieces are gonna go together like this to create our platform pop-up. Now, before we do that, before we attach them to each other, a couple things we need to do. Now, the third T is gonna go in between, but you don't need the little tab at the bottom, so you're just gonna cut that off. And glue it down in the center of one side. So I'm gonna kind of line it up with its buddy over here so that they're in line with each other. Ooh. Glue it down and make sure the top part of the T is above this score line. See, make sure you can see that. So the top part of the T is above this score line, so that when we do this, it's sticking up above. I didn't do a very good job of trimming off the bottom piece, or at least not a very good job of trimming it straight, so let's trim that off. Now, we are gonna need to attach this little flap to that flap. So I'm gonna start with that. Just add a little bit of glue. Stick it down. There we go. Next step is to glue the center together so that it stays together. So I'm gonna add glue to here. And bring my two sections together. Now it's good to set it down on a flat surface to make sure they are together flush at the bottom, since you want it to stand up properly. You again can also use score tape for this. I'm going to flatten the whole thing out. Make sure it's glued together nicely. And then the last step is to obviously glue the little tab on this side. I'm gonna add glue to this. Again, I'm gonna set it down and bring the edges together so that everything's sitting nice and flush. And there you go, that's the platform. So set that aside. And of course, I've got another one to do because I am doing 2 cards because my cousin had twins. I am going to assemble the second one, and I'm gonna just speed that up. So since you've already seen me do one where I'm explaining how to do it, I'm gonna speed up the assembly for this one so that you can at least watch it a second time, because yeah, this is one of those things I always go back and refresh my memory on it before I assemble it by watching the Lawn Fawn video again. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do that now. So there we go. We have 2 platform bases for our cards. And now comes the fun part, the decorating. So I am going to stamp a bunch of images to decorate the platform pop-ups. I'm probably going to end up stamping more images than I need, which is okay. You can just save them for later. And because I'm going to be coloring them with my Copic markers, I'm using Memento Tuxedo black ink. If you are coloring with an alcohol-based marker, you need to use a dye-based ink to do your stamping. If you use a pigment ink, you will end up getting ink on your markers and ruining the nib. And I am going to stamp on Express It paper. I like Express It best for coloring with Copic markers. I know there is a school out there that really likes the Nina Crest Solar White for Copic stamping, or for coloring with Copic markers. I've tried it. I don't get as good of a blend, and I'm not as happy with the blend using Nina as I am with the Express It. And I know part of the reason why people like the Nina Crest Solar White is because it's less expensive than the Express It, but I just don't enjoy coloring on it with my Copics. So that's why I'm using Express It. And I am also going to be using my Misty for stamping, and I apologize if there is some glare. There's not a whole heck of a lot I can do about that because, well, I quite frankly need light to see what I'm doing. And what I do is the Express It comes in 8.5 by 11 sheets of cardstock. So I just cut a sheet in half, and then it fits perfectly in my Misty. And I apologize if you can hear my chair squeaking in the background. I've got to figure out a way to fix that, but my chair is very, very squeaky. And so what I like to do when I am working on projects for card making and I'm doing a bunch of stamping is I will stamp just a whole sheet of images, color them, and then I have, for most of my Lawn Fawn stamps, the coordinating die. And this first one I'm going to be using is Oh Gnome! And what I do is I just take them out and lay them down on the sheet. And put my magnets in place to keep the paper in place. Then I flip it over, press down so that the plate picks up the stamps, and these guys are a little sticky. I'm gonna move another magnet into place to help keep the paper in place. And I'm gonna ink it up, which you probably can't see because that's too far off camera. So here, I'll scoot over. I'm gonna apply ink to my stamps, shift it over, flip, and then I am gonna use, I created this tool. I think you can find some videos on YouTube on how to make these, and it just helps apply even pressure when you're stamping to get a good image. I made this using, it's a votive candle holder I picked up at Michael's, a wood disc. I added some felt to the bottom. I dug out a circle and stamped a little unicorn on it. That's a Stamping Bella stamp, I believe. Colored that in and then just added some sequins so that it was pretty. And okay, I don't know if you can see, but my stamped image is not as crisp as I would like, which is why I'm using the Misty. Especially with dye inks, they tend to pool a little on your clear stamps. And so having a stamping tool like the Misty makes it really easy for you to restamp it so that you get a nice clean image. And that one got smudgy. That is not great. I am not thrilled with how those came out. Of course, because I'm doing it on camera. Let me clean off my stamps. I'm gonna try stamping them again. And as I was saying before we started doing the stamping, and I figured it would be best if I was actually, you know, doing something while talking. I have the coordinating dies for most of my Lawn Fawn stamps, which I know is an investment because they are not cheap. In fact, the dies tend to be more expensive than the stamps. But I have found over the years, I am always running behind with getting cards done for holidays. So what I like to do is when I'm card making for like Halloween, Christmas, whatever, I will sit down and plan out all of the cards I'm going to make. Then I will sit and spend an afternoon stamping all the images onto, half letter sheets of paper. Then I can color them at my leisure, and I will often take them into work with me and spend my lunch hour coloring and use the dies to cut out the images. Oh, he did not stamp at all. And so that's why I have invested in the various coordinating dies. All right, so you can see this came out much better and he came out much better. And for some reason, the little guy in the middle is being difficult. I'm just gonna stamp him one more time. So you can also fussy cut the images out. You don't need to use the coordinating die. And for the longest time, I was like, why would I buy a die? I can just hand cut it out myself. And it really just came down to a time issue. And so I do buy coordinating dies when I buy stamp sets, especially from Lawn Fawn, because they always have a coordinating die for their stamps. Also going to say a word about my stamp storage while we are stamping. I break up stamp sets for the most part. A couple of these, like the Gnome, they're all together because I got a little lazy and I've also been running out of space in my stamp storage. I do not keep them in the original packaging. I put them with their matching theme. I've been doing that for years. I know a lot of YouTubers like keep the sets together so that they can show you the packaging and all that. The only stamp sets I've kind of kept together in their packaging are my relatively new purchases for Stampers Anonymous, because I've run out of space in my closet where I store my stamps, which are in CD and DVD cases. So those are being stored separate, so I'm just keeping them on their little plastic sheets. And also Darkroom Door, if you buy stamps by Darkroom Door, they actually come in a CD or DVD case. So my Darkroom Door stamps stay together, but otherwise I will break up my stamp sets, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. Here's an example of me separating out my stamp sets. So there are 3 different stamp brands in this CD case, and it's my Christmas stamp set of presents because I figured these are birthday cards. I want to have a couple presents on the cards. So I've got all of my present stamps together. And when I store my stamps, I stamp a sheet to go in the DVD case so I can see what's in the case. On the back, I list the stamp manufacturer. Actually, there's 4 different ones. And then I have a separate binder that I have sheets with all of the stamps set out with the name and number, because I have 2 CD cases of presents listed next to what everything is. And again, a list of which stamp brands the stamps are from. So here is my index binder where I stamp an index to all of the stamps I have. So for cleaning my stamps, I have a little shallow dish to the side of me that has like a little scrubber sponge in it and that I put water in. So I just flip the stamps over into that and I clean them off. Another thing to keep in mind if you're stamping this way and are going to die cut is be sure to leave enough space around the stamped image for the die, because they will bubble cut around the image and not cut along the edges as you can if you are hand cutting them out. My Misty, I love it. It's great. If you're just starting out with stamping, you don't necessarily need a Misty, but I do highly recommend it if you are planning on doing if you're planning on getting into coloring with alcohol ink markers, because as you see, pretty much every time I stamp an image, I want to go back over it and stamp it a second time to get it crisper and cleaner, because of how clear plastics stamp with dye-based inks, and you need to use dye-based inks if you're coloring with alcohol markers. It's not as necessary of a tool if you're going to be coloring, say, with colored pencils and are going to use something like VersaFine Clair to stamp your images, because those tend to stamp better the first time round than with the dye-based ink. Here's another tip if you are using a Misty. The magnets that you get for the Misty are very strong magnets. So I have them wrapped. This one I haven't redone yet. I used masking tape originally, but that kind of rips apart after a while. So this has got packing tape wrapped around it so that I have little tabs so I can pull them apart, and just be careful of your fingers because they will pinch skin. Now, if you are finding you need to shift your stamps and they're sticking to your finger, an eraser is a great way to push them around and have them not stuck on your finger. And one last tip with stamping with the MISTI is when you go to do the second one, you're not pushing down real hard, you're just lightly pushing down. That's what went wrong with my first set of gnomes, is I pushed too hard, and that's why the lines got a little fuzzy and were not as crisp as I would have liked. So there are all our images for our 2 cards. Now it's time to color everybody. So with coloring with alcoholic markers, it works better if you put it on like a piece of scratch paper. I usually just stick a pad underneath. You want something absorbent underneath. It just works better that way. And I use minor, I'm using alcoholic markers for my coloring here, and I have Copic markers for 2 main reasons. One, when I first started, the options were really Copic or Spectrum Noir. And the second is because Copics are refillable, and I like the fact that I don't have to throw out a marker when it runs out of ink. I can just buy a refiller for it, refill it. If the nib gets damaged, they sell replacement nibs. I can replace the nibs. I am a Copic marker girl, and until another alcoholic marker company starts doing it that way where they're refillable, I'm not likely to buy non-Copic alcoholic markers. I also highly recommend, this is the hex chart. It's created by Sandy Allnock. I'll include a link down below. If you are getting serious about coloring with alcoholic markers and you are using Copic, and she has hex charts, I think, for a couple other brands, I highly recommend it. It gives you some idea of what colors fit with which other markers. And so I usually pull it out when I'm trying to decide what colors I'm going to use to color with. I also have this little index card holder that I have started creating my own favorite color combo charts so that I don't have to spend as much time thinking about what colors to use. I can flip through and be like, oh yeah, that's the colors I want to use for that. I am going to show you the coloring of a couple of the items, and then I'll probably do the rest of the coloring off screen because otherwise this video is going to be days long. So let's start with, how about we start with the little hedgehog. Isn't she adorable? And I think my favorite color combo for the hedgehog is the E70s. So I do E70, 71, and 74 for coloring the hedgehog. So let me pull those out. You can see this is pretty much what the hedgehog's gonna end up looking like. All right, I like to start by laying a base coat of my lightest color. I find it blends better when I do that. And there are lots of schools of thought from whether you should go from light marker to dark, dark to light. This is what I find works best for me, and I've been coloring with Copic markers for, I don't know, 15 plus years. So I start by doing that, and then I go to my darkest marker and add in where I want the dark spots. And because I want to keep the belly area light, this is going to be mostly flicking it to give some spines to my porcupines or hedgehog. And so that was E74. And you'll notice 2 different shapes of Copic markers. That's because I have some that are the Copic Chow and some that are the Copic Sketch. The reason for this is when I first started out coloring with Copic markers, I wasn't sure if I was going to like them or if I was going to keep doing it. And the Copic Chow are less expensive. However, not all of the colors come in the Chow. So generally, if I have a sketch marker, it's because that color doesn't come in the Chow. So that's why you'll see the difference between markers. So I'm just gonna add in a little where I want some darker spots. Now there's also a lot of videos out there in discussion regarding, you know, your light source and where the shadows go and things like that. I don't actually worry too much about where my light source is. I kind of pretty much assume that it's just full on straight at them, mostly because I don't have the layout necessarily of where they're gonna be and where there might be a light source when I'm coloring, you know, a sheet of images like this. Not too worried about it. I pretty much put my shadows and my darker spots where things would likely cast a shadow, you know, under the brim of a hat, under the arm. This arm's behind the body, so I tend to do that a little darker. So I'm not all that worried about my shadow placement, especially with images this small. Just going back in, adding a little bit more of flicking. And that's the base of my porcupine done. I do want to do a little bit more to lighten up the ear. And then for, I did on that one, my sample one, I did pull out the R79, which I think I'm going to do so that I can get a few more defined spines for my little hedgehog. And hopefully you can see what I'm doing. And I'm just kind of lightly flicking the marker. I'm not really pressing all that hard because I just want to get little short lines to give the impressions of the little spines on our hedgehog. Now for the center of the ear, I'm going to use RV10, which is a nice pale pink. Now comes the fun part, decorating the hat. Now I feel like this is a springy card, it's a birthday card. I want to go with some yellows and make it kind of a straw hat look. So I'm going to grab Y11. As my base color. Just gonna color that hat in yellow. And then I want to add, I think I'm going to grab some E31, which is a brown, because I want this to look like a straw hat. So I'm just going to add a little bit of brown to it, kind of coming in from the sides. And then I'm going to finish it off with some E15. No, sorry, Y15. There we go. We've got a nice little straw hat. I'm trying to think, what colors do I want for the flower and the ribbon? All right, pink's really calling to me for that ribbon. So I think, and I want to keep it a light pink. I don't want it a very bright, intense pink. So I'm going to go with RV10, RV2, RV21. So I'm gonna start with the 10 because that is my lightest color. Add a little RV2 at the edges. And the 21 to blend. And I think I want a little bit more. Now something to also bear in mind if you're coloring with alcohol ink markers and you're new to it, it will dry lighter. So sometimes you may want to go back and double check and see if it's still the color you want it to be. I think I am going to go purple on the flower. And I think I'm going to go with a fluorescent dull violet which is FV2. And then a very bright yellow for the center. So I'm gonna go Y06. My Y06 needs to be re-inked. And you can tell because if you look at the nib, it's kind of, you see it's kind of faded out. That's because it needs more ink. All right, I don't feel like doing that right now. Let's grab the Y02. May come back later and add a little bit more of the Y06 because that's a little duller than I would like. So that is our hedgehog. And next up, I will do one of the gnomes for you. All right, so we're gonna work on our gnome, and I think I'm gonna do a green shirt on him and do it a brighter green. And so I've grabbed YG1, YG09, and YG06. So again, I'm gonna start by putting my lightest color down first. I'm gonna come in with my darker color and put it along the sides, kind of under his beard because his beard would cast a shadow. Then I'm gonna grab the YG6 and blend that out. And then back to my lightest color to finish out the blend. I think I'm gonna do the hat in the blue. And so I'm gonna I've grabbed B02, B05, and B16. Now for the hat, because it's rounded on the side, to the sides, to give that effect, I'm gonna keep the center as light as possible. So I'm gonna start with my lightest color, but I'm not gonna color all the way to the middle. Then I'm gonna come in with my darkest and add just a little bit along the edge. My mid-tone. And I'm going to pull the mid-tone pretty much to the edge of the light blue. And now when I go over it with my light blue, it'll keep the center very light, which will help give the feel of it being carved. His pants, I'm gonna grab B97. I like the B90s for like a denim-y look. And because it's such a small space, I'm gonna kind of just one marker blend it, which you can do. You can lay down the one color and then just come in and darken it a little to give a hint of a little shadow. The boots, I'm just gonna do C5, which is a cool gray. Just gonna, oh no, those need to be a little darker. All right, I'm gonna grab C7 and darken those up. I think I'm gonna stick with a dark gray belt as well. So C5 and C7. put a base of Y8, I'm just grabbing a random yellow, on the belt buckle because I'm going to end up going over the belt buckles with a gold pen because I think that looks nice. So let's just go ahead and do his belt buckle while I've got it out. That belt buckle and this belt buckle. For his face and hands, I'm grabbing E000 and E00. And just to add some finishing touches to the beard, I'm gonna grab C0 and just kind of add some hints of shape to it, kind of following the contours of the beard, just to kind of give it that like finished look. So now I'm gonna go ahead and just color everything in and come back and show you the finished results. And here are all of the colored images with the list of markers that I used. For the gnomes, I numbered them to help identify what colors went with which gnome. I actually recorded all of the coloring I did, so if you want me to post a separate video showing you how I colored everything seen on these cards, leave me a comment down below and let me know. I'd be happy to do that. Okay, so I finished coloring and die cutting out all of our stamped images for the two cards. I also die cut the Lawn Fawn treehouse and its accessories. And now I'm gonna go ahead and ink them because it adds some nice depth to the die cuts when you cut them out of colored cardstock. That's what we're gonna do now. And so I've grabbed Vintage Photo Distress ink and my brown brush, and I'm just gonna go in and ink the whole thing, and I may grab another darker color and go in on top of this once this is all inked. I am not gonna ink the door because I want to ink the door in color, like obviously brown is a color, but in a different color than brown. So I'm gonna be careful not to ink the door. So I'm gonna grab a scratch piece of paper just to cover the door with to ensure I don't ink it as I try and get all of over here inked. I do want to add a little bit darker brown into this, so I'm going to grab some browned espresso and come in with a little bit of that. And I'm not too worried about over here because the frame of the door is going to cover any missed spots over there. And I think I'm gonna go back in and add a little bit more Vintage Photo over top, just to kind of lighten up the ground espresso a little bit. But because I was using a dark color with my brush, before I go into the lighter brown, I'm gonna just wipe it off on one of my paperless paper towels. Now it's clean, so I can go back in and add a little bit more Vintage Photo over top, just to kind of blend everything in. For one treehouse, I am doing pink door frame, and I think I want my door to be purple, so I'm going to cover up the spots I don't want to get colored purple and grab I'm gonna start with shaded lilac, and then I may add wilted violet because I don't want to go too dark too quickly. And I'm gonna grab one of my smaller brushes for this, since I'm working in a smaller space. In doing this, you could always die cut the whole tree out of, say, purple, and then just cut off the door and attach it to get your purple door. And so for the other one, I want to do the door in blue. And I think I want nice, bright, salty ocean for this. Really need to remember to brush upward from the bottom so as not to ding the door and bend it like that. Uh-oh, I got a little carried away with my blue there and now have blue on my tree. Let me grab some more brown and fix that. There we go. Problem solved. Now, for the accessories, I am going to ink, even though I die cut them out in color, just to give them a little bit more depth. These are kind of flat. I think I'm going to use some Twisted Citron to start with, for the door at least. The grass, I'm going to use something different. For the pink, I'm going to try Kitsch Flamingo. Now for the little bits of grass, these cloud-like shapes are actually the leaves for the top of the tree. And now this one, I was using scraps, didn't quite fully cut out, but since I'm going to layer them together, I wasn't too worried about that. So it's Distress Ink Mowed Lawn. And again, because I was just trying to add some depth to these pieces, I wasn't too worried about getting like any kind of even coat on. And in fact, to add a little bit more depth and interest, because these are distress inks, they are water reactive. So what we're gonna do, splatter them with a little bit of water. So I'm gonna grab an acrylic block, and I'm going to add some water to it. Then I'm going to grab a paintbrush. You can see, hopefully, what adding the water did. You can see some spotlets from the water where it hits. So it just adds a little bit more interest to the greenery. You can also take a little of the distress ink, put it on the acrylic block, add some water to that, and splatter that on, which, to keep this from getting all messy, let's put some scrap paper down, the paintbrush, and just do splatters of ink as well. There you can kind of see, it just adds a few dark spots. So that makes them far more interesting than just, at least in my opinion, than just leaving them the color when they were die cut out. And we're ready to start assembling. We'll grab our first. I'm gonna start with the purple door, and I'm gonna grab my art glitter glue and some tweezers, and I'm gonna start putting the pieces together. Now you don't need a ton of art glitter glue to get it to stick. But if you are using art glitter glue, bear in mind, once it's stuck, it is stuck. Doorknob I'm gonna use, sorry for bumping that, my quick stick, put a dot on there. And there's that part of the tree done. So there's the tree, and it's gonna go here. Now, so that it sits nicely in here, I'm gonna cut it flush with the door. So I'm just gonna trim off that root, and then glue it onto the back tee. Just add a line of glue. Oops, sorry if I'm off camera. Just attach it like that. It will attach and hold. Now what I am probably going to end up doing to add some greater stability to this is cut the tree out again and attach it on the back to this, just so that it's a little less flapping in the wind like that. Okay, so let's do the rest of the assembly on this. And as with the tree, I am going to cut this down a little bit so that it sits better against there. Now I'm going to hold on to these pieces because I can stick them on the sides of the box, which I'm going to probably cut out. The die set comes with little mats to put on there, so I'm probably going to cut out a few mats just to break up all of the green and maybe stick Mr. Fox here and a chick on each of the side panels. So we're going to set those aside for now. And yeah, I definitely need to cut out another tree to go there. And it's, now if you don't put something big like this on the background, it will fit in a regular, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 card envelope. But if you put stuff like that, it won't necessarily fit in that size envelope. So that's one done. We're gonna set that aside, and I'm gonna go ahead and assemble the second one. And of course I forgot before attaching him to use the gold pen on his belt buckle. Okay, we are gonna do our best to just kind of add the gold piece up in the air like this. Of course, I'm gonna have to go back in when this dries with some black to add the center of the buckle back in. But before I forget, I'm gonna do the other ones. So there we go with that one. And yeah, definitely need to add some reinforcement to the tree. And then I'll save the other gnomes for going around the edge. And I'm going to add some glossy accent to the flames on the candles so that they're a little more sparkly. So I'm gonna add a little to each of the flames, so that it's got a little shine, and I'm gonna set those aside to dry before I do anything else to this, because otherwise I'll end up sticking my finger in it and making a mess. Okay, so they are mostly done for now. I'm gonna just leave them alone while the glossy accents are drying. What I will probably do off camera while they are drying is die cut pieces to go along the sides and the front. I'll probably stamp on the front piece, "Happy Birthday." And I'll probably do that off camera because I don't think you really need to see me just stamp the words "Happy Birthday." And then I'll attach those and come back and show you the finished product. Here are the finished cards. As you can see, I did add the little rectangles on the front and sides of the pop-up box and stamped "Happy Birthday." I also die cut another tree to reinforce the trees at the back to ensure that they were a little bit more stable. That's all for today, and please be sure to do all the things that let YouTube know you enjoyed my video. Hit the like button, leave me a comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Thanks for joining me, and happy crafting!